Welcome everybody to the Depths of Motherhood podcast. This is a special season dedicated to the tribe of the mother, but also I know any mothers listening will find this extremely valuable. I've created each episode to offer simple, digestible, and supportive information, which I hope will educate and inspire anyone who listens. So this is by popular demand. Please help us to educate and support the tribe holding the mother. Look forward to passionate and highly knowledgeable guests dedicated to reclaiming the essence of birth and embracing conscious parenting. Throughout our time together, our guests will serve as the guiding voices, illuminating the path towards a deeper understanding of preconception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. This is with the mother and the baby being the center of the exploration. In the show notes, you'll discover the link to Nourished Mother package, which will offer many different resources to complement each episode. This is free for all members in the Women's Circle, or £33 for everybody who just wants to purchase the package. A heartfelt thank you to our incredible guests and immense gratitude to my partner for supporting me on this creation. And finally, last but not least, special thank you to Araya, my daughter, for being the endless well of inspiration. Welcome everybody. Today we are joined by Victoria Wilbraham. She is a mentor, guide, and the host of Normal, Boring, Free Birth. Victoria's approach to birth is beautifully simple and grounded. She supports families to strip back any unnecessary information and complicated language so that they can truly experience birth in its most raw and embodied form. She supports mothers in trusting their own voice, to find their yes and to voice their no, directing awareness back into their body to really hold all of the emotions, all of the thoughts that come through on this journey. In this conversation, I asked the question, what are the most common fears that you have seen come up in your community and the women that you work with? And as she drops into this question, it really is guided back to examining these fears. Often these fears are traced back to their roots in the ultimate fear being death. This conversation unexpectedly went down the path to explore death more deeply. So if this topic seems too intense for you right now for whatever reason, please honor that feeling and come back to it when you're ready. And for those of you who are diving deep with this conversation today with us, just take a deep breath and be open to explore birth, death, and this sacred space where they both meet. We'll be talking about how to bring death into the conversation with reverence and respect, just as we do with life, with the birth of a child. We'll be exploring how the fear of death can often be masked by welcoming unnecessary interventions and people into the birthing space. We'll be looking at ways in which we can reclaim death as a rite of passage and how we can come to hold any emotions and sensations that arise inside of our body surrounding death, hold them with curiosity and love. And we'll also be looking at how grief and death have been medicalized and there's been an attempt to silence it. And what might this world look like if we come to reclaim death and grief? I really love how Victoria is showing up in this space and for all the love and energy she's pouring into her community. She has a Facebook group that has started through the Normal, Boring, Free Birth podcast. And she is continuously sharing content to bring this conversation forward. And also sharing the stories of other women, which I think is so powerful and so necessary. When I was pregnant with Araya, I didn't have any interest in listening to birth stories apart from the ones from my mother and my grandmother. And my awareness was placed on births that were orgasmic and blissful. I didn't leave space to listen to other stories because I was afraid that I would listen to something and it would completely freak me out. But what I missed in them moments was I missed meeting my fear, which was showing up in the artwork I was doing, the birth art I was doing. Though there was one picture that still sticks in my mind. And it was me squatting down, birthing Araya, and just red everywhere, blood everywhere. I drew what my fear was, and I shared this with my partner Elan. And instead of going deeper into the fear of dying, I chose to place my energy on what would we do if this happens, which is completely logical and necessary, but I really didn't hold space for what is that? Like, what is that fear? Where is it held in the body? Can I be with that more deeply? Because in the moments of giving birth, the logical mind falls, and all that's left is you with the sensations inside of you. So I was holding and feeling the residue of these fears whilst I was giving birth. And this episode also sets the stage for next week's conversation with death midwife Reverend Olivia Barham, who is the founder of Sacred Crossings. And we're talking all about death, as you can imagine. So if you are exploring this topic, stay tuned for next week, as I really think these conversations are going to complement one another. And I want to say thank you so much for everyone who's following this podcast. It would be amazing if you could just head over to Spotify or iTunes, wherever you're listening to this, and leave me a quick review. I realize I have not asked for this since we began. So thank you, thank you, thank you. In other news, let me give an update into the Women's Circle space. This week, I shared a womb massage and water of the womb meditation. The recording is now up in the membership space. Our next circle will be how to host a women's circle on the 16th of November. And then the circle after that is our first mother circle on the 18th of November. I'll leave the link in the show notes, and these circles are all by donation. All right, it's time to listen to this conversation. Before we move in, let's take a deep breath, making any adjustments to our body, softening through the shoulders, through the hands, letting the chest open to fully receive the next breaths. When you feel ready, let them exhales be heard. Welcome the inhale all the way down into your womb space. Let this space be filled with your breath, with your life force. And as you exhale, feel that softness and that opening moving from your womb space all the way through your body. Thank you so much for being here.
All right. Welcome, Victoria, to the show. Thank you so much for being here. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time.
Thank you for having me so much. Yeah, I've been really looking forward to this as well. And this just, for me, feels like a bit of time off, you know? Because life's busy and it's just nice to chat to someone, like sit down, stop, breathe a bit. So anytime if someone invites me to, have a chat with them, essentially, I'm like, yes, I'm in. I'm going to do it.
I know exactly when people say to me, how is this podcast going for over 2 years? And I'm like, this is the only time I get to be alone and to listen to somebody. Because when I'm with my mum friends, we talk a million miles an hour because we know we're only going to get 30 seconds. It takes the right kind of friends to understand that, doesn't it? So I would love to hear more about how you got into doing the work you're doing. And I know you have a podcast, which I've listened to before and which I think is incredible. So I'd love for you to share all about that.
Yeah, okay. All right, I'll dive in and just introduce myself for people who don't know. I think that's the great thing about podcasts, isn't it? You don't know. There'll be some people coming to this and they'll be like, oh, yeah, I know Victoria. And then there'll be others who are like, who the hell is this? So I suppose as an introduction for everybody listening, I'm Victoria. Hello. I am a mum of two. And one of my babies, my daughter, was my free birth baby. My son was my home birth turned hospital transfer baby, which is a terrible way to describe him, but that was just the experience. And that's what we're here to talk about, birth stuff. So that was his birth. And I'm a wife, and I'm an artist, I'm a painter, I'm a tattoo artist. But then most recently, I am a free birth mentor. I'm a coach, effectively. I always think wording around that kind of thing is a bit tricky sometimes because it's like, I don't know. I work with women and couples who are interested in free birthing because they feel that could be right for them, and we connect and I help support that journey, however it looks. And that might end up with a gorgeous, amazing free birth. It might end up with a home birth with a midwife, perhaps, or however they want to do it. I also hold women's circles too. I know it's something you do too. And now I'm a co-host of a podcast, Normal Boring Free Birth, for normal, boring people, which is all about normalizing free birth. From my own experience, when I was looking at free birth, it felt like such a alien, very spiritual, very removed from myself kind of thing. Like I had a few crystals, it ended there. I didn't feel very spiritual. And I felt like, this sounds really good. I want to birth my baby at home. I don't think I want anyone there, but I also don't think I'm that kind of person. I was me and I did it. So now, yeah, our podcast is very much about sharing very normal stories. And so if someone applies to be on it and they send us a little bio and they say, oh, yeah, well, I had a free birth. It's a bit boring, though. We're like, yes, let's get you on. That's all we want. We want people who are just, it's nothing amazing. I mean, fantastic. If you want a great big ceremony, that's great. But also, if you just want to go about your life and then crack out your kids in the living room like I did, then you can do that too. And the whole idea is, it's accessible. We welcome women from all kind of walks of life. And we hope we create a space in our kind of now community. Started like a podcast. Now we've got a whole community for just those who perhaps also feel a bit like I did and feel like, oh, maybe I'm not the right kind of person to free birth. And you totally are. If you want to do it, you totally are. So yeah, that's what I do these days. I've got a few strings to my bow now. But yeah,
Wow. I love it. Thank you for like stepping into this, because I resonate with what you said about, like this. For me, it was overwhelming stepping into this world of free birth. And it's kind of funny that it has a word, you know what I mean? It's like when you say like raw milk instead of like just milk, because it's been pasteurized for so many years. People here in Peru, they say, what do you mean raw milk? Do you just mean milk? Because they don't pasteurize it from the farms. And this is how I felt about this. And I went down the path of like, I was trying to educate myself so much. And because that's how my mind works. I was a nurse before and I'm like, I need to know everything. But what I missed out, and I know I did it deliberately, it was like an avoidance, was I didn't listen to birth stories, any of them, because I didn't want to know. I didn't want to be filled with any fear. I didn't want to know any other thing that could happen apart from me just getting into a nice little squat and my baby coming out. So I avoided it. And now on the other side, as I listen to stories, I'm like, that is the medicine, because in them stories, what I don't want to listen to is usually what I have a fear of. And that is now my guiding light. So I think what you're doing is absolutely incredible. So thank you.
Thanks. It's just, I mean, I totally agree. I think stories show us so much, because I think, funnily enough, so, when I had my kind of mind-blowing birth, I suppose, with my daughter, I went down the road of, oh my God, I need to help more people do this. And I'm going to start an Instagram and I'm going to start spreading the message. And I made all these posts initially that were all about, oh, do you know that your baby, that their placenta and their cord contain 30% of their blood after birth, and if don't cut it too quickly, and all these kind of things. And I went down the very factual route. Initially, I wanted people to learn stuff. I wanted them to know the things that I discovered that felt like light bulb moments, and the whole thing of like, do you know you can decline stuff? Do you know you can say no? Do you know that everything is your choice? And that's where I started. Stats and statistics, figures, studies. But now I'm so much more about stories and about women's experiences, how they feel, how everything feels, and knowing that actually all that stat stuff and all the research, it's so limited, and it can actually lead you down a path that doesn't help. So I've kind of gone, like, I've only really been doing this a couple of years, because my daughter's, she'll be 3 soon. And it was really with her birth that I started this. But in that short space of time, I've kind of gone, oh, it's all about your rights and it's all about knowing stuff. And then I've gone, oh, actually, you can still get really screwed over by the medical system despite knowing everything. So what can we do instead? And actually, it's about each other and learning from our own feeling and experience and everything else. So I've kind of gone full circle. And now I'm sat here kind of going, yeah, studies are cool, but it's not everything. No, I'm more interested in people now.
It can lead to that false sense of security, though, as the mind starts to feel safe. But in the moments when you're giving birth, the mind is like gone and you're just there with your body. So if you don't feel safe, and also if you haven't listened to the stories of what's happened to other people, then you're just in kind of your own little box. And I, like you, with my daughter, I only have one. We went to hospital as well. I know it's because there wasn't that bridge back to story, to my body, to what is like inside of us, like what we know innately. So I'd love for you to share, what does free birth mean to you? Because I know this is a word that is everywhere on social media, and I feel like it would be great just to like unpack it through your eyes. What does that word mean to you?
Really basic about it. And I think free birth to me is consciously without medical support. So you've made that choice. It's very certain that's what you've decided to do. And it's birthing without any medical support. So that's no medically trained midwife in a room. That's not being in a hospital. Even if you're on your own in a hospital, it's very intentionally going, I don't want anything that's offered to me from the medical system. I don't want anyone in my space who is medically trained. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to take responsibility for my birth. That's what I'm stepping into. I do also think that might mean having a doula or a birth keeper or someone else there. I think there are conversations around, is it a free birth if there's someone else there who knows a bit about birth? And I think that's a really interesting conversation to have. And I think it's good to ask yourself, well, why do you want them? And what are you looking to them for? I think that's really valid. But to me, my definition that I choose to have is consciously without medical support. So it's just a non-medical birth. So, and I think that's generally what gets used here in the UK. And probably on the whole, but I'm also, I don't know, I'm kind of less of a fan of the word. If I'm honest, I see some people using unassisted birth, intuitive birth. I don't know. And I think we were saying before we were recording about milk just being milk. And I think it's birth just being birth. It's the same thing. And I think the longer I get into this kind of work, the more putting a label on it almost feels a bit funny. Almost feels a bit, I don't know, like, do we need it? But I think we kind of do, because I think we need to talk about it in a way that's clear. The thing I've come across, almost trying to let go of a label, is that if we do that, I think we lose the awareness of what it entails to prepare to free birth. That's what I found anyway. Because I think if we just go, free birth's a feeling, or, free birth's just whatever I want to call it, we're missing out on those key conversations that are, if we're intentionally choosing not to have medical support, what do we need to do? What's good to look to in ourselves, with our partners? It's a different kind of prep. And I think if it's a different kind of prep, it needs a title, unfortunately. So I think that's why.
That's a great answer. And I feel it brings up this conversation that I always seem to have with people, which is like this language being this man-made technology that can actually be a bridge to deeper understand and for also holding space for fears. So if, for example, people had a perception of free birth from what they've seen, and maybe their child, their daughter, maybe their partner is saying, I want a free birth. And they're like, like I've heard stories, or like, I'm not sure. And it's just like in that moment, you get to say, okay, thank you to the word. And now let's like dive into what is actually happening here.
Oh, totally. I love that. And I think that's the best way anyone can approach their birth, like at all now, is so much less like, don't look. What was I saying the other day? I feel like I was saying this to someone, and I was saying that if we stopped using terminology, like I am a fan of word, I'm kind of a fan of labels. I don't think we should have any of it. But I think if you approached things to do with birth and you took away all the terminology, if we took away things like a cervical sweep and we just called it what it was, it's just, this is what someone's going to do with their fingers in your vagina. And if we understood things in the way of what actually happens, and we removed all that sort of window dressing, that sort of feeling of like these words and this language, and because I think going to pre-birth can feel like you're having to learn a new language, and you're really not. You can just follow what you feel and follow what feels right and do that stuff. It's like you don't need to be checking off boxes or filling out little categories. What kind of, burning box for the cord will I get or whatever? It's like start from the bottom up and grow from there. Build what you want to include and make your own thing. Because and I don't know, I feel like I'm in this space now where I'm almost looking at everything birthy and just going, nah, that's nonsense. I hate that. We don't need to talk about that. That's pointless because it's all irrelevant. Like whoever listens to this now, like if they're pregnant and they're planning their birth, you don't need to care about what anybody else did particularly. It is valuable listening to stories, but this is your life. This is your birth. And you can make it however you want to make it. I mean, you don't need to say, oh, I definitely want a free birth or I definitely want this. What is your version of any of this? What does it look like? And go from there, you know? So I think,
Wow.
I'm less of a fan of the labels all the time, but it makes it hard then to talk about. Exactly. It doesn't tend to go very well. We need to talk about stuff. But yeah, like, I think it's just being open, being receptive, and not fixating. Because I think if I think back to past me when I first got interested about free birth, it's like I was hungry for it. So I would try and investigate it like a specialist subject. And I think if you do that, you're missing a trick of actually looking at yourself. You're kind of looking that way when you need to be looking and reflecting back on you and going, okay, but what am I feeling? What's coming up for me rather than all this stuff outside of me? Because I mean, I think if you keep doing that and you keep looking that way, away from you, I'm pointing on a podcast, but yeah, if you're looking away from yourself, you're not doing the main biggest thing that will support your birth, especially if you want a free birth, and that's listening to yourself. If you can't sit here right now and go, I know how I'm feeling, I know how my baby's feeling, I've got this amazing connection, you're not doing the prep, you're not doing the work, you're studying. And it's like being at school, isn't it? You can study some stuff, but are you embodying it?
Oh
You know,
my
are you,
gosh.
you're putting it on.
That is, everything you're saying now, I'm like light bulb moments, because I felt like I wanted to be in this club, like a free birth club. And then so when I put myself in this, like, I'm going to be there and I'm looking at social media because that's all I have is information about this right now. Like I don't have any books. I just have what's on social media, which is very much, it's like this show. There's a show of what is happening, and it's 15 seconds, 15 seconds of 1 minute of videos or pictures. And so when I had to go to hospital, I felt such failure. Like I had these things come up, and I didn't tell anyone about my story for such a long time. And when my friends would tell me like, oh, about their home birth and free birth, I'd be so sad. And so when I started doing the podcast, it really helped me to feel what I'm feeling and also be like, and hold space for somebody else. And that was really, really healing for me to, like, with all the things you've just spoken about, it really brought me back to this place again where it's like, oh, why have I made it about everybody else? Like, why have I made it about this club, like almost like a hierarchy, like this? And I think it was a thing of like, well, if now I know I can birth without medical interventions, then I should be able to. But the truth was, my body didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe in myself to hold what was happening. And as soon as I like lost my anchor, I was like, I went to the closest thing that made me feel safe, which was the hospital. And so as I unraveled that, I was like, oh my gosh. And when you're talking, I'm like, yeah, I had the same thing of just like coming back, bringing it back. And all these things like seem like extra because really it's like, let's get to know what's happening on the inside, what is going on there. So I'm curious what you see with the people that you're talking to. What is one of the things that seems to be the biggest fear surrounding a free birth?
I mean, it's just death, isn't it? I mean, it's always death. I think even if it's dressed up in, oh, what if I hemorrhage, or oh, what if my baby doesn't breathe when it's born, or this kind of stuff, the roots of all of it is death. And it's for good reason, because we have such a bad relationship with death. We don't look at it in any other way other than, oh, that's terrifying, I never want to happen, don't look at it. And it's funny, like, I did this thing the other day, because I like Instagram, I like creating content, and I try and come up with something different, what I can put out there. And I was like, okay, one of the first things that happened to me when I created my account was I had a lot of criticism from mothers, from groups or pages that were all about stillbirth. They came across my little page when I had a handful of people following me, and they were like, oh, you're spreading a dangerous message. You shouldn't be talking about this because you're encouraging mothers to birth outside of the safe medical system. So then what if something happens? What if their babies die? That's really terrible. And I felt really bad initially. I felt like, oh my God, I just want to talk about something really positive here. I didn't think I would be almost like offending people who have been through such a big experience. And I think that was my first experience of almost feeling a bit like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Is this a subject that I should stay away from because I've got no experience of losing a child. You know, I haven't had a miscarriage even, you know, so I can't relate to that. But what I do now, or at least I took a bit of time, I lean in way more to the death stuff now than I ever used to. Because I think, that's like we were saying before, the bits that freak you out or that worry you are the bits you need to explore. Because if you can remove that weight and dominance in your body about the fear of this thing, it won't create this kind of hold over you. And I mean, it almost seems funny now. Like, I mean, no disrespect to anyone who's been through that experience. But God, honestly, talking to women who free birthed and their babies died, they have generally such a better perspective of death and loss. And they really look at that as, you know, well, that was my relationship with my child for that space of time. And that was our experience. And they actually quite consciously choose to not have that short experience damaged or interfered or disturbed. And by the medical system, that would probably whip a baby away and rush it off and be quite disruptive of that experience. You know, we can't get away from death. We can't guarantee it never happens. We can actually make choices about how we experience that. And that's actually a huge part of free birth prep that I used to be quite scared about. But now I'm like, no, let's talk about it. Let's get all into that. Because if you can get better and on more friendly terms with death and loss, it will transform how you view mainly the conversations that come up are around death and loss. And the joy and interest I've had from those conversations and the strength actually a lot of women get from talking about that, they want to talk about it. Like, it's not something that they want to shy away from. And yeah, I want to create a post that's like a comparison of, you know, what's the mainstream medical advice around stillbirth and things like that. Let's look at what they're telling everybody. You know, what are we supposed to look out for? Because it's so counterintuitive. You know, there's almost a fear like they can't even have the conversation. I listened to a podcast from a super mainstream, like labor and delivery nurse or something around stillbirth. Honestly, she spent a good 20 minutes apologizing for the fact she was about to talk about loss and warning her audience. And, you know, yeah, that's perhaps being gentle with your listener, but I also feel like it's kind of infantilizing women a bit. It's taking away the opportunity of, let's talk about this because it's really important. You know, we don't need to go, oh, do you think you can handle this? Oh, if you are so many weeks pregnant, you might want to turn off now. Like, no, listen and see how you feel about it.
This is like, as you hold birth, you're holding death. And that's what I come to realize with going into this. Because so when I had the hospital transfer, the things that were said to me were, well, you know, at least you and your baby are safe. And healthy and alive. They're the most important things. And I felt like, but wait, like, I want to tell you, I want to share about my trauma. It's like, I want to share what experience I had, but people felt really uncomfortable holding that because it links closely to what could have happened. And this conversation of death is, I'll put it this way, like in Peru, they say that when you give birth, you go to Ucupacha, like, which is the underworld, which is death realm. So a mother starts to drop down as she's in pregnancy, and she'll go down into the underworld, and she'll stay there in postpartum as well. And when she's there, she's like retrieving this hidden wisdom. But they definitely had this connection to the death where the mother is moving to bring life forth through her. And they also, there's difference in the way that they celebrate life and how they celebrate the transition of someone out of their physical body. And for me, I feel very comfortable stepping into that exploration. It just feels in me and inside of me, like women have been holding life and death in their hands since the beginning of time, being the doulas of life and death and crying and mourning over the death of people to let their emotions free. But it's the same as what society has done to birth as what they've done to death. They have said, please stay quiet, or we're going to organize the funeral and this is what's going to happen. You just give me money. And it's like, oh, but like, what about this actual human experience that I'm having that is always actually seemed to be projected as a negative thing? And yes, is painful. Like, it's so painful sometimes. Like, am I going to die myself when I'm feeling this? But actually, that is the connection with being a human and to another human. There is the magic right there.
Oh, God. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, are we robbing people of if we make death so sterile as well? I think even like the experience of going through it ourselves and also the experience of someone in a life going through it. I mean, Instagram is an amazing thing, isn't it? Because I think through following birthday accounts myself, things like death doulas have popped up for me. And I've been quite fascinated. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, what's that about? And I saw some account, I don't know who it was, I can't remember, but I think her partner passed away and she had like a vigil, and it was like her partner's, body was in their home still for quite a number of days after his death. And people would visit and their children were around. And I thought, that's beautiful. That's amazing, because the amount of time that you get to let that sink in, I think for your own body to accept that they have gone. Because I remember growing up, if a grandparent died, you were told you never saw them again. And it almost felt like they were living over there somewhere and you could just go and see them. And so you didn't, even if you went to a funeral, it's a box, you don't see them. I mean, here in the UK, they're just closed casket boxes. There's such a separation between like the life and the death stuff. And I think I had my most profound realization about death after I free birthed my daughter, because I think I'd worked so hard and I'd done so much preparation and effort to really bring her into the world in such a way that was really gentle and loving and felt so good for both of us. And I think when she was about a few, weeks or months old, I had this realization of, I'm not going to, ideally, I'm not going to be with you when you die. And I'm actually really sad about that, because I was so present and I was so involved with bringing you here. I'm not going to be able to do that for you. And I mean, maybe you're going to be involved in my passing instead. And it's that kind of relationship we're going to have. But it made me feel really sad, because I kind of thought, I want to help you through that too. I want to be there for you for all experiences. But I also want you to have a full life. I'm only going to live so long. There were just logistical things, that just mean I'm probably not going to be there. But then I think what I can do is support her in her understanding of death, that kind of thing, make it more of a part of life, not a scary thing. So it's so weird. I feel like if you birth in a certain way, and I guess it's birthing in a way that's so connected to being alive, I think it will change everything you do and everything you see and experience. I mean, I don't think there's been much in my life that hasn't been affected by free birthing, which on the face of it is just like, well, it's so belittled, isn't it? It's like, oh, it's just one day. It's not. It's a whole life experience.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for sharing that as well, that in that reflection that you had. It's so beautiful. And I got this vision as well, like when when somebody dies, if it's an open casket and the family comes, like you said, and you're like looking, and we're really like nourishing one another, just like you would in postpartum. Like you're there, you're feeding one another, you're with it. It's not about the money, like who's paying for this, who's doing this, like them in the middle, the person that has transitioned out of their body, and then the family around them. And that's just like when we think about birth, like when I think about birth, giving birth, I imagine that like my ancestors are around me as well. Like, do you know, like, because they live inside of me and I'm just like carrying on this lineage. And I don't know, it's just like this rite of passage that needs to be witnessed in some way. So whether you have a free birth with no one there, you're still going to step out and see people that love you with your child. So that is like people saying, I see you as a mother now, like I witness you. And then the same for death, like this is same thing for the person that's transitioned, but also the family. They've gone through their rite of passage. They're no longer maybe a mother with a son that is in their body, or a son with a mother that's in their body. So it is just like reclaiming ceremony. And it's funny because when I started this, I also didn't have the same like spiritual connection. It was very much like medical. But the more I've gone on and felt it in my body, the more that I see it is such like spiritual is one of them buzzwords, right? So it's like also one that I don't really like to touch on too much, because it also makes me, I hear it everywhere. It makes me cringe a little bit still, but like it is that connection to our past and to our future, and just love, like really it's just love. And when you mentioned something in the beginning, which my teacher, one of my yoga teachers a while ago used to always say, every fear is rooted in the fear of dying, in the fear of death. And I sat with this for a while. I'm like, well, I'm afraid of this. And I go back and I'm like, oh, I feel like I'll be exiled. And if I'm exiled, I won't be able to survive on my own if I was like in this like animal body. So it's really, really deep and super interesting.
But it's funny, isn't it? It's funny, like it really becomes one of the biggest conversations about birth prep. And it's like I say, it seems so small now, and all the other birthy things, the details. But I know it's the stuff you worry about though when you're pregnant. And I know that, I like to fly the flag for normal people that don't feel very spiritual. It's like spirituality is also something you can write yourself as well. It doesn't have to be a costume you put on. It can still be whatever you make it. Everything's got a branding, everything's got a visual look that can be off-putting. So I think that's where it can get a bit lost. But yeah, certainly I do sit here now as someone who thinks birth is a huge rite of passage. It definitely is. But it can take a long time to get there. When you start, birth's just a day where I have my baby and I'm making a family and they're going to go in that nursery or all that kind of stuff. It's so removed. So I'm always trying to go back to like, what was my step 1, 2, 3? Because I like to kind of reach people who are in that place because they're the ones who want to help, And I think sometimes I'm watching myself of like, don't get too lost in because it's so fascinating and I love it now. But past me would listen to some of what we've said and go like, oh yeah, whatever.
Pass me the sick book here, please.
Yeah. But it's fine because I think, it can pique an interest and it can make someone curious and they go like, no, okay, what are they on about? What are they talking about? And they get their own steps there. Yeah. So I think it's that balance, isn't it? Or I try and be not like inaccessible. I try and relate. Because I do understand, in the early days for me, it was like read one hypnobirthing book. That's all I feel I need to do. Get a bouncy ball, maybe hire a pool. And there's so much more than that to help someone see or shine a bit of a light on. Maybe there's a bit more you want to look at.
And you're like this stepping stone, like a very specific way. Like everyone has their own way. And we're all going to the same plane. If the people who are showing up are really like truly devoted to getting women back into their body and getting them back into like remembering their power, it's different flavors for everyone, right? Like, and that's just the beauty of it. And I feel like on social media, the sound of these words like sacred and ritual and ceremony and rite of passage, they can all become like a sound that you don't really hear. You don't really get the taste of it. But when somebody says something that's like out of the norm, you're like, oh, let me, like, that feels good to me, to my mind, actually. That feels great. I was looking at one of your posts and it was about, I think it was the cesarean one. And it was like, is it your fault? Like, it's your fault. But you started off like, yeah, it's your fault. And you're like, oh, this feels really weird to say that. And I was like, that's a good one. And I was looking into the comments and it was, I think it was a woman who had, she'd had three cesareans. And she was like, is it possible for me? Like, and so that made me think, we're talking to these mothers, these families, is there any situations, like any past experiences or like anything that they're embodying that might not be the safest option for having a free birth? And how would you direct that? How would you have a conversation about that?
Yeah, I get people approaching me and they'll go, oh, I've got this going on. Is it safe for me to free birth? Or I've got this, or this has happened to me, or I've had, 3, 4, 5 C-sections or whatever. Is it safe for me to plan a free birth? And I go, yeah, if you want to, and if it feels like that's what you want to do, I will never say otherwise. I won't say, oh, you shouldn't do that. But then I'm never saying anyone should or shouldn't do anything. I'm not going to sit in a position and go, everybody should free birth. That's not I'm about at all. I'm talking about a topic and a subject, but I'm not going, oh, everyone should do this because this is the best thing to do. But likewise, if you've had that experience or this is something that's happened in your past, well, you definitely shouldn't. It's not for you. Because I'm not in a place of telling people what they should and shouldn't do. If I do that, I am no better than an obstetrician that they'll go and meet who will tell them that, oh, well, given your history, you can't have a home birth. It's just not safe, So I'm not going to be telling people what they can and can't do. But also I think that's because what I want to do now, if I've got like a kind of goal, I suppose, or a reason of being, I get so excited when I see a woman who is sat in her own responsibility and she knows she's the focus of it all and it's all her decision making. and she's right in the center. Because I think when you put the woman in the center of everything and you go, how are you feeling about this? What do you want to do? What feels important to you? They know, and they will come up with that answer. It's just that no one's ever asked them before, or, or they've been made to feel like there's an expert somewhere else over there, or they'll find it on a Google search or something that will tell them the right answer. And the right answer is always what you want to do. And that doesn't matter if it's the most risky sounding situation ever, because you could say statistically, I don't know, even if someone had a very small chance of an outcome being good, if they think they're that small chance, then that's what they're going to do, and they can choose to do that. It doesn't matter, but it's down to you. It's down to what you want to do. And I think be wary of anyone. If someone in your life is going, oh yeah, not for you, why are they saying that? And what are they basing that on? And what makes them think they know you and what's best for you? And I think be wary of that.
And as you're saying that, it makes me think about what we were talking in the beginning about language, because I think through understanding how language can be manipulative, but we've been so used to it that it doesn't seem like that. So say you're going to see the doctor and they're like, I'm just going to do a scan. I'm just going to do an internal scan. It's like, there's no, they're not asking for permission. And like, I've experienced that myself. And I, as a nurse, like I probably did it, even though I got taught about asking for permission, like that is their body. In the way that which overrides that is there's no time. You've got so many patients, and just get it over and done with. And that is really, really sad. And I'm like so glad that I'm sad that I've maybe treated people like that, like unconsciously, but also at the same time, I'm really glad that I can now reflect on it and see how there can be this manipulation through very simple language, and even just not explaining a procedure, but saying a word that is so familiar in the birth world, but you don't really know what is happening or what the side effects are.
I think it's really interesting to recognize that, because I don't think everybody does. And language, absolutely. All the time is used, isn't it? Of, I'll just do this. We're just going to do this. There's no asking. And then, if a woman is asked something enough times, is the yes that she eventually comes up with, is that a yes? Or is it a no covered in a yes, because she's been asked that many times that she just can't say no anymore? And she's been pushed into a corner of feeling terrified about whatever it is. I mean, this is why I really don't think the whole conversation around advocacy in the birth space is that good of a conversation to have anymore. Because if you just think all you need to go into a hospital environment, or even to have a midwife in your home, is a strong sense of your rights and a really good birth plan that says no to everything, that's not going to do it. That's not going to avoid the coercion, the abuse, the assault. It's not going to stop it. And nor can a birth partner, and nor can a doula, because they can't stop it either. Because what you need to stop coercion and abuse and assault is for that person to not do it, and for that person to allow the no to mean something. And what if they don't? And then I think there are so many women who are left with the feeling of, I didn't say no loud enough. I didn't push it enough. I just crumbled. And it's so crushing to hear that. And I hear that for women going, I failed. I didn't do it. I wasn't enough. And it's like, it's not you. It was never you. You were trying to say a no in a system that never heard of the word. It was never going to take your no, because that no to them sounds like a yes. So
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And that experience feeds into these like unconscious ideas that we have about ourselves. I'm with my friend right now who's pregnant, and every week I'm doing body work for her, and I'm saying to her, just tell me what you don't like. If you don't like something or you want something, just tell me. And it's obviously she has a nice experience, but also to get her voice, like to feel into her ability to say what she needs, and also to listen, like first of all, before that, listen to her body to see what it needs. And I just feel like just these moments through pregnancy, or even, just through life in general, just being surrounded by people that aren't trying to manipulate you, that aren't, if they get offended by you saying, no, oh no, I can't come out for dinner today, instead of them like getting offended and like saying some words that don't feel good, it's like that person will say, wow, I'm really grateful. Like, I'm really inspired that you honored your body And if you're around them people that like are inspired by you honoring yourself, like that is amazing, because that's what we need. Because everybody has their own agenda, and everyone is not like, we all have our own subconscious beliefs, but there's so much about trying to fix somebody else because we think we know them better than they know themselves. So how about we just start to get the woman into her body so she knows her body the best, because she's the only one who will know it.
Oh God, absolutely. I mean, that's so it. And I mean, it's so funny. Like when I started wanting to work with couples, first thing I did was go, oh, I'm so unqualified. I must do a course. And I did a hypnobirthing course. And I tell you, it's been the biggest waste of time and money that I could have ever made. Really nice women on that course. It was fun. It ended there. And there was nothing on there that I needed to know or that qualified me. And the amount of times now, like when I'm doing sessions with women and couples, we're not really talking about birth. We're talking about her relationship with her mum. We're talking about her kind of relationship with authority figures, or the way she feels about her body, or the fact she's got a horrible self-image and she really feels down on her physical appearance, and she's really treated herself badly through her lifetime. We're talking about those deeply ingrained patterns that we've created in our past that are now feeding into the ways we make choices about our pregnancy and birth, because they're where they all come from. You know, you can do the course or read the book or whatever, but it's like, I think a great way of looking at it is you can have a bunch of women in a room and you teach them the same birth course, and all of those women are going to go off and have different births. And you could say, oh, birth's unpredictable, so that's just why it happens. It's not to do with that. Birth's quite predictable. We go into labor and a baby generally comes out. It's the fact that all those women are going to have different histories, upbringings, paths, lives, the way they feel about themselves, the connection they have or haven't got, their relationship with their partner, family, all that stuff. That's what's going to feed into their birth choices. It's nothing to do with the course. It's you. It's who you are. That's the stuff.
Wow, you're on fire. Perfect.
I love it. I think I'll talk here with someone I'm working with, and then I'll go back in the house. This is our like outside officey bit, and I'll just talk to my husband like, "Oh my God, it was so great. She had this breakthrough. It was so amazing." And I love to see it. You know, I love to see someone progress in like themselves. It's not about me splurging information to people, and I've done that. I wrote like a massive course, and it was the most boring thing in the world. And, you know, no one got anything out of it. But if I'm working with someone and I let them speak and I listen and I maybe point out a few things and I just go, oh, have you noticed you say that about yourself, or you've used that word when you talk about your baby or whatever. And it's just these little things. And then someone goes, oh my God, I had no idea I did that. And then they have their own discovery, and then they do the things they need to do. I mean, because, yeah, it's like the studying for testing. It's like you can parrot the words, you can repeat stuff.
Yes.
But if you have your own like little eureka moment, then you will never forget it and you will feel a difference, you know.
Oh,
and I
that
love
is
that.
so powerful. Yeah. And it's like, it gives you also, as you give them something, it reminds the parts of you that might not fully believe it, you know, like, as they have that breakthrough moment and you see them just like drop back into their body, like, oh, wow, thank you so much. Like, parts of us also see that and be like, wow, we can do this. And it becomes like this co-creation. And in the beginning you were like, oh, coach, using these words, mentor. Yeah, like this language is interesting, very interesting, because it's well beyond these words that we use. And I'm really happy that you brought up this idea of, you know, like eating all the information, doing all the courses. Like, okay, if the mind needs that, but you'll do them and you'll realize there's something else that needs to be looked at. And the way that you are holding space, like you mentioned, you're just gently like taking these little threads out and saying, that is like such a gift. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And I would love for you to share with the listeners where they can find you. I know you said you do one-on-ones, but if you could just share your offerings and whatever comes through.
Well, I would love to say thank you. And thanks for giving me the space to share this and to have this sort of a conversation. I think it's so important. And it's just so much fun as well. I think it's like, and it's good to get excited about birth prep and this whole kind of topic of birth and rebirth and everything. But yeah, absolutely. If people want to find me, if you've been listening to this and you feel like, oh, then maybe this is someone I want to hear more about. I'm mainly on Instagram. I'm Free to Birth on Instagram. And I have a website too, so freetobirth.co.uk. You'll find me on there as well. And yeah, you can just get in touch with me directly on there. You can send me a message. I am quite messageable. You can contact me. I don't like to just sort of keep at distance. I want to hear from you. I want to connect. I've got like a free call. You know, people often just book a free call, have a really informal chat with me and just connect and see if that's something we can do together. Because I think it's a two-way street. You know, I think if you're working with someone about something so personal as, you know, your body, your baby, birth, you want to feel like there's some kind of common thread or connection there. So I always do that. Before I work with anyone, we have that call. And then, yeah, Normal Boring Free Birth, I have that page too. So that's also Instagram at Normal Boring Free Birth. Or just check out the podcast, stick it in Spotify, you'll find us, or Apple Podcasts. And yeah, give our stories a listen. I'm talking on it, but it's more about the women sharing their stories. And I host that with my co-host Leonie, and we do it together. So yeah, come find us over there if that sounds like something you want to know more about.
Oh, thank you, Victoria. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing and showing up. It is incredible. And I have just had the best time talking to you. It's gone so quick. I looked across and I'm like, what? Where did that time go? It's crazy.
No, it's gone so fast, isn't it? I think that's the thing when you get some people together that are all about birth and they just love it. Time goes so fast. But it's been gorgeous talking with you, and thank you so much for inviting me on your podcast. And it's been really lovely to hear your insights and shares as well. So thank you.